Welcome to Chautauqua Books. I'm Roy Harvey. My guest today is Jack Cashel. He's the author of 2006, The Chautauqua Rising. It's a novel. It takes place, as you might assess from the title, in Chautauqua, or the Chautauqua area. Welcome, Jack.
Well, welcome to the show, Roy. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You have a local publisher here, a new publisher, Olin Fredrickson.
Olin Frederick. They're out of Dunkirk, New York, and they're just a real happy coincidence that I happened to read about them last year, just at the time I was finishing up this novel, and it seemed like a likely fit to a publisher that specializes in political books, as this is kind of a political thriller.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be set in the very county in which the book is set.
It's extraordinary. What an incredible match.
Yeah, it was. I didn't even know it existed until
when I read this, or before I read it, actually, I thought, oh, this is written on for consignment practically, because I mean, from what I gather of the publisher, you guys are co-thinkers.
Well, it's as if they said, well, let's as actually it's their second book, let's set a book in Chautauqua County and make it a political thriller, and that would be natural.
Right.
But it didn't happen that way. I had started writing it 3 years ago.
3 years, okay.
And then it was just last year that I...
What's your first book?
First novel.
Yeah, first novel.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. To get some background on yourself, you have a PhD from Purdue University?
Right, in American Studies.
American Studies.
And I was I went to France as a Fulbright professor after I got my PhD, came back to the United States, and for the last 18 years I've worked in as a writer, producer, last 10 years independently. And essentially, for a living really, I produce video, primarily video. I work in all media, but I've been doing more and more video. Documentaries and also a lot of corporate stuff, commercial stuff.
Right.
Out of Kansas City, which is where I live. So.
Right, and you're also executive editor of
Ingram's Magazine, which is the city's business magazine. Okay. So, which I do as sort of a sideline, a very busy sideline, but really? A sideline, yeah.
Well, before we get to this is clearly, as you say, and it's fairly obvious, it's a political book.
Yes.
So a political book invites political discussion,
Absolutely.
Not a lot of stuff about aesthetics and so forth necessarily, although
Right.
we can do that too. But I want to get a sense of, just to give us an idea of the plot.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do that, but
just briefly, and I don't want to give away too much, but on the very first page, we learn that our protagonist, who's a 26-year-old sports writer in Boston, his name is T.J. Conlon, learns that his father has been found dead of an apparent suicide in Lake Erie State Park. Everything is very geographically set and very specific. And he comes back to bury his father. And in the course of coming back to Chautauqua County, and he's persuaded to stay here because his father was the editor of these various newspapers, publisher rather, of all the independent newspapers in Chautauqua County. TJ is persuaded to stay, take over the newspapers, and in the course of that, he learns why his father died. And the more he learns about that, the more drawn into what is brewing in Chautauqua County, and just swirling all around him, much unbeknownst to him before he got here, an insurrection, a political insurrection. Now, probably, as we describe it, the greatest grassroots uprising since the Whiskey Rebellion takes place here. It's set in the year 2006. And I think it's, as described, I tried to make it not only make it sound like it's possible, but almost probable that something like this will happen someplace. And Chautauqua County, for a variety of historical reasons, and the cultural geography of the county, is as likely a place as any place else.
Likely, and also, I guess you have some background here in Dunkirk?
Yes, in fact, I was just quick anecdote. We're just telling you in the car. I was married in Dunkirk, New York. My wife is from this area, which is how I got to know it. We were just over at Webb's down the road here on West Lake Shore. In fact, our book is at Historicas, which is in the Webb complex there. We stopped by, right. And it reminded me that on my wedding night, we were going to go to London the next day, but we just picked a place at random to spend our first honeymoon night, and we stayed at Webb's. And I did not want to tell anyone that, I didn't want anyone there to know that we're on our honeymoon. I didn't want anyone to come to the room or any of that kind of honeymoon stuff. So I bend over to sign the register there for that first night. and a single grain of rice falls out of my head.
Oh, no.
And it lands on the counter.
Really?
So I brushed it off so she wouldn't
Too
see
late.
it. Yeah, right.
Too late.
And she looks, give me a quick double take, and then I'm standing there filling it out, and then another grain of rice brushes, and I don't know what this lady's thinking. She's probably not thinking, oh, rice fell out of his head.
Right.
Why would he have rice in his head?
Right.
Probably thinking, lice fell out of his head, and do we want this person to stay at our hotel? But it worked out.
So she didn't get it. Oh.
No, I never told her. She probably still thinks there's some lice-infested guy.
I'm sure that there's some sort of pejorative term for some minority called a rice head, but
exactly. Right.
I don't know.
Or a lice head. So.
Yeah.
But anyhow, no, I know the area well. We just drove over. A few of us came over from Fredonia, up over the Thayer Road, through the Amish country up there,
Right,
which was
yeah.
critical to the book.
Sure.
It's the most beautiful drive in America. It's so underestimated, especially in kind of day like today. It's a really sharp, crisp day, and it's and in the evening, it's lovely, just beautiful. And the physical geography of Chautauqua County and the cultural geography, the whole mix of people who live here is missed even by the people who live here. Sometimes when you live in a place, you don't notice what's around you. You take it for granted.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Although many people who live here do tend to get away a while and then just get back as fast as they possibly can.
Yes.
I mean, and then they really do appreciate it quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's and we have a summer place now out on Lake Erie, and it's especially like that, just gorgeous. I mean, you can just sit outside all day and just look at the water for 4 hours.
Right. Well, let's see. Let's get to the book itself and the politics. Question: what do you think of that term? He who pays the piper calls the tune. I mean, what is that adage? Is that a meaningful one to you?
In terms of American politics today, it has meaning only because we have made a virtue, the media particularly, have made a virtue out of moderation. So if a candidate or a political officer is a moderate, and everyone says, "Oh, moderate, that's good." What a moderate means, he has, I go from issue to issue, which means he can be bought on any given issue and no one's going to notice. That is the ultimate paradox of moderation. And you have no fixed base, you have no fixed principle. And that means that whoever's paying your bills, who's ever getting you elected, can influence your voting dramatically, and your constituents don't know.
Right.
Because they don't know whether that was an act of principle on your part or an act of purchase on their part.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked this question is because it seems to me, and I'm going to characterize the book, and you can correct me.
Okay.
It seems to me that a conservative or a ultra-conservative or a right-wing book, or right-wing thinking, has excludes the corporate power that generally calls the tune, in my view. For example, it seems to me that the media, being owned by essentially 15 major corporations, isn't an independent voice. Yet, in your book, the media is it acts as an independent voice, influenced by, a liberal way of thinking.
There is the media, like the corporate mavens who own them, are conservative in the sense that they're trying to protect the status quo. And that is kind of a gentle liberal orthodoxy that is probably as offensive to the right as it is to the left.
There are extraordinary. One of the things, I found this book very educational, truly.
Oh, thanks.
And I think it should be read widely. It's a marvelous book.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
It is a perspective that is. How would you characterize it? I mean, politically.
Politically, I would say it this way: is that anyone, it is as you suggest, it's a right-wing book to the degree that America has abandoned its founding principles to the right wing. It's a right-wing book to the degree that the movie The Patriot, which I saw last night, the Mel Gibson movie, is a right-wing movie. Although it's about...
Well, it's right-wing in the sense that Rambo is a right-wing movie.
Right. It's about basic principles and the defense, basic American principles, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence.
But there is a question of right. I mean, the right is excluded, as is the left in this country.
Yes.
And there are some similarities in thinking in terms of the villainry.
Yes.
I think.
Well, yeah, we share villains, right?
Yeah, but there's a difference. And I would like to explore this because I think
Yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Right, and and part of the thesis in this book is, for instance, and there's one scene in there that's critical where they're sitting around the table and they're discussing T.J. Conlon, who this book for him, this adventure for him rather, it's both a political and philosophical coming of age of a journey to self-knowledge. And he asked these people, he's sitting there with a Seneca Indian, he's sitting there with an Amishman, sitting there with a Catholic priest. And, as the Indian says, after a while, it's kind of like a joke. We're sitting here, like in the joke, we got an Indian chief, Right. But he asked him, what do you have in common? He says, well, the Amish believe in private property and individual rights, and the Seneca believe in communal ownership, right? And he says, your wards haven't voted Republican since Grover Cleveland. Then what do you all have in common? And what they have in common is the belief that each community in America, each group of people in America, or each individual in America, depending on how you want to live, either as an individual or within a community, should be able to call its own shots, as long as it doesn't trample on the rights of anyone else. And the Amish are a classic case. Right now, their way of life is totally under threat because of various EPA, OSHA, the HUD, Department of Education. They want to tell them, not only want to tell them how to think and act and pray and believe, they also want to tell them how to build their septic tanks, how to drain their water, how to build their barns, how to run their sawmills. They've been running these sawmills, they've been living this life for a quarter of a century in America, a quarter of a millennia in America, and they're one Supreme Court decision away from having their way of life obliterated. They had an exemption, I talk about that in the book, Yoder versus Wisconsin, in regard to education. Lose that exemption.
So what you're projecting for 6 years in the future, you're saying is happening now.
Oh, it's happening right now.
With OSHA and so forth.
Right, and what I also say is that most people won't notice it. They don't notice it now. And if they notice it, they won't care. But that's always been the case. I just read a book, I just read Paul Revere's Ride, about just the brilliant first 2 days of the American Revolution. And at that time, a third of the people were siding with the British. Another third could care less, just wanted to stay out of trouble. And a third cared. And that's essentially the way it is today.
That third that did care, essentially were mobilized by pain. I mean, if it hadn't been for his writing, it wouldn't have happened.
Tom Paine, right?
Yeah, Tom Paine.
And he was, he was critical. And you had great voices being raised.
Right. I mean, there wouldn't have been a Declaration of Independence had it not been for Tom Paine.
Yeah.
He created the ambience for those.
And he was an Englishman.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them were. There's a lot made of that. I mean, he's only been here a year in the U.S., but he was still an Englishman. But it was a quick transition, wasn't it? I mean, to be
right. That was America, and still is. That you could become an American. As we talk about in here, we embrace, as Crev Core writes, Hector St. John Crev Core. We embrace you to our alma mater, and you become one of us.
Well, in the concept of being left alone, you embrace a lot of different groups. And I thought for one point in time this was a Posse Comitatus book, more or less. Then I thought it was an Opus Dei book. Then I thought it was a right libertarian book.
Right.
But it's sort of all those things.
It is, because what we're saying, all that these people are asking is to be left alone.
Yeah, but they're going a little further than that, aren't they?
No, none of them are asking to impose their laws on anyone else or their way of thinking on anyone else.
Right.
What they want is the rights of a free people in a given society to make their own laws. So, for instance, let's just take the case of abortion, for instance. Yesterday, for instance, as you know, the Supreme Court, I shouldn't date this, last week.
No. Recently.
The Supreme Court said Nebraska couldn't make laws outlawing what, virtually everyone agrees is barbaric practice. That's the partial birth abortion. Now, what we're saying in the book is that, and that's a constitutional right that was made out of whole cloth, that women have a right to an abortion. There's no mention of abortion in the Constitution, of course not. There's no mention of a right to privacy. All these people are asking for is give states and give communities the rights to make their own laws again. They've lost that right. And it's raised by the Seneca. Because in the Handsome Lake's initial vision, which we talked about 200 years ago, one of the things they outlawed was an abortion and love magic and other things. And the Seneca chief, the Seneca Indian in here is saying, just give us the right to make our own laws. If we don't want our 14-year-olds to, to profane their religion. Let us make that decision. Don't let that decision be made by 9 unelected people in Washington. Just bring the rights back to the people, to the communities, to the individuals who live in those communities. Just like the 10th Amendment says. I'm paraphrasing here, but it says, and this is critical, and most people don't know this, but does anyone have their Constitution with them? It says anything that's not enumerated, anything that's not specifically covered in the body of the Constitution. And the Constitution, if you haven't read it, is only 6 pages long in your almanac. It's a pretty brief document. Is reserved for the states and for the people of those states. And that's one of the 10 Amendments that's just been totally trampled. And that's where we talked about earlier about paying the piper. Ambitious politicians are just, as indifferent to your rights as whether you're on the left or the right. They don't care.
Truly, right.
Yeah.
If ambition is the primary thing that motivates them.
Yes.
Back to this pay the piper that calls the tune. It seems to me that a thesis of a conservative or ultra-conservative perspective is to ignore corporate power in the mix and assume that they have nothing to do with this thing. A politician at an upper level has to get reelected, and he has to have that kind of money, and the only person that will supply that money are corporate powers, for the most part, corporate monies, and then the only people that can monitor how he performs are a lobbyist who can direct him on how to vote. And I didn't see any of that sense of the thrust of corporate power in this sort of thing.
No, in fact, that's why Chautauqua County works so well, because it's removed from.
But all these laws and all a question perhaps the big thrust that really destroyed feudalism to a large extent was the doing away with the commons in England.
Right.
Right. It seems to me that that's what's going on today. What's your comment on that? And that is, there is a tremendous amount of elimination of the general public from a concept of the commons in terms of media, access to media.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Deregulation, too.
Because there's 2 things going on simultaneously media-wise. And this show is an example of it. 10, 20 years ago, there were no such shows as this.
Yes, but 10, 20 years ago, there was still the vestiges of underground so-called newspapers, as you say in your book. Alternative press was sort of around, and 20 years ago.
Well, let me just describe that, because what's happened, and a lot of people have missed this, especially the people who are focused on the mainstream media, which has gotten progressively more and more orthodox and less interesting. Right. But they're under threat, hugely. Several media came online starting about 1980 that no one anticipated, right? One of them was cable TV. It began, thus, this cable access. Another was the VCR. Now you say, what does the VCR have to do with anything? Well, what it means now is that, because I'm in this business, and I know we produce videos sometimes directly for VCRs. Surely, and we can bypass the whole media.
You're
AM talk radio, the personal computer, and the internet. It's had a dramatic effect on bringing, just like like the Tom Paine style, of bringing the information back to the people. Now, 3/4 of American people still get their information right off the TV news. They pay a little bit of attention. They get whatever headline Ted Turner wants them to have. But for 1/4 of American people, 1/3 of the American people, on both the left and the right, are remarkably well informed.
Right.
The irony of America
today.
today.
Do you know this Tom Paine website?
I am
TomPaine.com.
TomPaine.com. In fact, I know the guy who.
Is that right?
I'm trying to remember, why did I go to that website, Tom Paine? Tell me about it, because I've been there.
Have you?
Yes.
It's just full of. The thing is, I just discovered it 3 days ago at a lecture at Chautauqua, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just full of a lot of updating of Tom Paine's assessments, crisis papers, and the rights of man and stuff like that. And I just signed on to it and looked at it, but it looks pretty interesting.
Right.
But there are a lot of other ones. You're right. They're totally. I don't expect. I mean, you have. Part of your book is that the internet plays a key part in it, getting the message out internationally.
Sure.
Nationally,
because right now, I was at the what's called NATP. I don't know if you know, but National Association of Television Programmer Executives.
No.
Conference in New Orleans. It's an astonishing show. It's all the networks are there, and I met Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, you know what I mean? Like people like that are running around. The Beastmaster.
Sheena of the old.
No, they had both Sheena
movies?
and who's the other one? Xenia, Jungle Princess,
Yeah.
she was there too, and Judge Judy was there, and Martha Stewart.
I don't know who these people are actually.
They're all
Sheena
these
and stuff.
Yeah, right. They're all these.
There was
TV.
a Saturday matinee. Sheena.
Yes, right.
Like Bomba.
But yeah, Bamba. But she's survived in different mutations.
Okay.
Various
She's
TV
not on
shows.
crutches then.
No, but the hit of the conference was what's called. We talk about this in the book. It's streaming, video streaming. It'll be commonplace in a couple of years. Now, essentially, everyone can be their own producer.
Right.
Everyone can be his or her own producer. I'll correct my own grammar here. And you can through the internet you'll be able to broadcast essentially like you broadcast on TV. And but the problem was
You hold that to be the problem.
and NatP was the content was so bad, and we're going to dilute
That's
it.
pretty much what wiped out public television. The content was so bad in comparison.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough time. How could you possibly produce a fairly decent show, interestingly,
Right.
with so little money
Right.
and so little equipment,
Right.
and so on and so on. So much of it turned to religious broadcasting. What do you think about that? You have a kind of a... you think
Religious
that's a very-
broadcasting?
Yeah.
I think it's excellent.
Yeah?
I think it's great. And I think
So that's what much of it's turned to, though. Is that informing the public on
on public TV, is it religious
public
broadcasting?
and public
Cable.
access? Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, what I like about, I've been involved in enough media kind of adventures, and when you talk about First Amendment in particular, the guy who pays the bills has First Amendment rights.
Right.
No one else does.
Yeah, that's what my point is.
Yeah.
Corporate power,
Right.
essentially.
If it's corporate, that's right. I mean, so Ted Turner has First Amendment rights. No one else on CNN has First Amendment rights.
Right.
However, here, you have First Amendment rights. On the internet, I have First Amendment rights. And my magazine that I edit in Kansas City, I have First Amendment rights.
Well, I have First Amendment rights to get on a soapbox. And,
Right,
right
exactly.
down in Mayville. But I mean...
And the beauty of, there's been a media revolution in the last 20 years, and what's happened is that those First Amendment rights have devolved into millions of hands. It used to be just in 3. It used to be you couldn't get on TV if there was 3 people who controlled your access to TV. And that was true for the first 35 years of television.
We've got to do a little housekeeping, sort of.
Sure.
And that's to say that we're talking to Jack Cashel. He's the author of 2006, The Chautauqua Rising. And that's the book right there, and you can possibly see it. It's a political mystery. It's a coming of age. This young man who returns to Chautauqua County, to Dunkirk, and investigates the murder, as it turns out, of his father. Jack, I want to ask you about distribution of the book.
Sure.
What's the story? I mean, on the cover of this book, Lake Chautauqua, there's the bell tower in Chautauqua.
Yes.
Are they doing a good job of distributing this book there?
Not exactly. In fact, we're on a borderline banned in Chautauqua, which is interesting. Not surprising, it's interesting. The final third of the book is set on the grounds of the Chautauqua Institution. Mm-hmm. And I know that institute well. I've been there many times. And it's a mixed portrayal of the Institute and what it stands for.
Well, it's not exactly mixed. It's highly critical.
It's pretty critical. It says it's a beautiful place. I mean, it is a gorgeous place.
Right.
And, let's give it that.
Well, I'll tell you, it was intriguing, and obviously you project this thing into the future.
Right.
So it's changed in your conception of it there.
Yeah.
But there's no razor wire around the fences of Chautauqua.
No, I added that.
Yeah,
It was just a little
that was a little dirty dig, wasn't it?
But it's 6 years into the future.
Yeah, that's true.
But it is very well fenced.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And,
so, what are you going to do about that? I mean, if a book that has Chautauqua as a title, it seems to me it's an appropriate place. Well, before I get to that question, I want to ask you this. Chautauqua is not a monolithic institution, the population there.
Right.
What do you make of the population? I mean, what's your assessment of it? I have one.
My assessment is this, and this may or may not be fair. Let's exclude the people who are old and have just been coming for a long time because it's where they've always come, and
Okay.
And let's talk about the younger population, the people who are more actively involved in the cultural affairs of the community. Mm-hmm. I would say that it has become a remarkably self-satisfied, complacent, orthodox institution, where the only people you see presenting there are people you see on, the Lair Hour, It's like PBS Live. And what that has done, I believe, is I think the Chautauqua has lost the fervor of its roots. You know, the innovation, and the innovativeness, and the creativity that made the institution famous, and a century ago. It's sort of like I wonder if you read this book, a wonderful book, Bobo's in Paradise, by David Brooks.
No, I heard the title. Bobo.
It's bourgeois bohemians, right? These Bobos in Paradise could have been written about today's Chautauqua. Bourgeois bohemians.
So you're not selling the book at the bookstore.
I'd love to get in there, by the way, because I think what the book raises are questions of critical self-examination for the Institute. And it would seem to me that if I had this gorgeous, wonderful institute, and it is wonderful, I mean, I won't take that away from it. I go there all the time, for various events. And it was dedicated to dedicated to analyzing the culture, which it is to some degree.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I have a view on that too. Why do you think it is that there's a reluctance to? Well, let me just ask you to tell you what I think, and you can tell me what you think. And that is, a lot of people are afraid of politics. If it doesn't reward their perspective, or if it doesn't agree with their perspective, they get lost.
Yes.
They don't really know what it's about, and they might get sucked into something bad. They might be terrorists or something.
No, Roy, you raise a good point, and I think the word fear, as you suggest, is. I go to dinner parties all the time. You know, the first thing the hostess take me is tell me aside. No politics, Jack. Right?
Really? Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, and these are university people.
Really?
And the thing is, see, I did.
Now, maybe they just have you pegged, and they think we're going to get more of this right-wing stuff from this guy.
No, actually, because I'm always the good boy. I mean, I did 6 years of talk radio, of daily talk radio in Kansas City, so people know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And I'll say to them, listen, I do this stuff for a living. I don't need arguments here. And frankly, no one here can keep up with me because I know all the issues, and I know all their answers. I know all my answers. And so I'll say, I will never raise it. I said, it's not me. But what will happen is, we'll be sitting there, my wife's chairman of the university English department. And,
which university is this?
University of Missouri, Kansas City. And we'll be sitting around, and, I'll be just talking about real estate, and, and the weather, and university politics.
And sports, of course.
And sports.
Yeah.
And then someone can't resist. They'll just jump at me, and they'll say something, just made to provoke me. And I look at the hostess, I'll say, I didn't start this. Right. Now remember, he's the guy who's starting this, But,
right.
No, the ideas are, you're absolutely right. People are afraid of ideas today. And they're not just political ideas, but ideas in general. I've been to 1,000 academic dinner parties, and ideas are the last thing people talk about.
Really, it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's a whole incredible depoliticization that's going on.
Yeah.
Good 30 years, but perhaps longer than that.
There's a consensus. And the consensus is just as troubling to someone on the right as it is to someone on the left. And that can, boy, if you don't want to, spill milk on it, right? You don't want to step on it. You don't want to, in a polite place, to rattle that consensus is unnerving. And Chautauqua is a consensus place.
Right. Eric Foner was there. Do you know his work?
No.
Oh, he's a historian from Columbia University.
Okay.
And he wrote several books, and it was extraordinary talk. It was a good talk.
Yeah.
And he's written on Tom Paine. But it is a rare thing that you get somebody that, has something really, really crucial said there. It seems to me.
Yeah.
You made a really nasty swipe toward the UN. Nasty.
Oh, at the UN.
Yeah. I mean, the UN has been, it's an agency that's, of course, been scuttled. But I mean, your guys, I think, Reagan and so forth, just ripped the shreds out of that institution as an independent body.
Well, personally, I think I'm not a great fan of the UN. And
no, I know that. I mean, it's a nasty little comment.
Unlike a lot of people I know, I don't have any great animus against it either. But its ambitions, and the UN is actually just a body in which those ambitions are encapsulated. There's a lot of people in the world. Ted Turner is among them, and a lot of Americans. Walter Cronkite, huge among them, who are globalists. There's two kind of globalists.
Well, globalism is, two kinds. Okay, go ahead.
There's the free trade international, which I
Right,
consider,
yeah, yeah.
you know, I'm a former Fulbright professor. I spent a year in France. I spent a year in Ireland. I mean, I like the rest of the world. I love France. But then there's the globalists who believe in, essentially, who believe in unified world government. And
Well, that's what the World Trade Organization is all about. I mean, that's what
That's where it's heading.
IMF and World Bank have been about.
that's where they're heading.
Yeah.
And it's right now they're sort of embryonic monsters. I mean, right now they're not problematic, and they probably do more good than harm. But they have the potential to do a lot of harm. And you see them being attacked from both the left and the right, interestingly. Whereas the center,
Well, you know, it's an
embraces it.
extraordinary thing. I mean, looking at this book, I was thinking, my God, this is incredible. Both the left and the right are after the same apolitical middle.
yeah,
You know, trying to alert it to the nature of the problem.
right,
You know, an infringement of rights, a loss of the sense of common
yes.
that Tom Paine and others
Right.
really have talked about.
Well, let me give you, here's a classic case. And this parallels an incident that took place in the book. It was odd, it just struck me as oddly almost frightening. The morning of April 22nd, Saturday morning, 151 fully armed troopers invade a law-abiding Miami home, seize a kid, right? Violate 5 of the first 10 amendments. You know, including knocking out the NBC cameraman. NBC didn't object, you know. A third of all Americans applauded that, right? A third of them were too busy, they could care less. Get rid of the kid, let's get something else on TV. And a third were horrified. And if you watch the people who are horrified, it was the people on the left and the people on the right who are horrified. People in the middle said, well, yeah, well, that was, yeah, I guess that was okay, you know. The network said it was okay. And they applauded. They chose not to know why that family was, you know, they chose to and we watched in 4 months, mainstream media turn perhaps America's best ethnic minority into its worst. I mean, they were like the John Rockers of network TV. As far as Cubans were concerned, it was open season. And we watched that happen. Then the week before, I could see the signs coming, just like they did at Waco. The week before, some quack pediatrician comes on and says the kid's being psychologically abused. He has to be rescued. Well, the guy's not a psychiatrist like he presented himself. He's a big donor to the Democratic Party. Never saw the kid. Hasn't gotten within 1,300 miles of him. Never asked to see him. Lead story Monday morning on Today's Show. They're interviewing this guy. Where did he come from? Right? And this is what we're talking about in terms of how this kind of thing can be set up. A couple days later, you know, you have more of these people coming out and telling the world what horrible people these Miamians are, lying about their status. They never violated the law. They were under no obligation to take the boy anyplace. They never said that they would threaten to resist. And we have this, and people applauded. That's what's scary. And that's where I think the left and right, you have people like Dershowitz and Lawrence Tribe who came forward, Alan Dershowitz, both pretty serious lefties, you know.
Well, I wouldn't call Dershowitz a lefter.
Well, he would.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody, well, anyway, that's...
But he's a civil libertarian.
Civil libertarian.
He's certainly not on the
mainstream.
right, yeah.
Well, I think you can have him.
No, well, I don't want him, but you take him. But at least on this issue, he was right. He was outraged. Lawrence Tribe, you know, who becomes, in a sense, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in this book, outraged. And people on the right were outraged.
It's extraordinary what you've done with this book. I mean, you've essentially made, in a way, Gore, President of the United States in 2006, as, by default, a hero. And I know you think that's nonsense, but the thing is, he looks like he's going to be, you know, the villain.
Yes.
But he reads a new poll, the poll that was taken essentially by the mass of people. I shouldn't give this away too much, but don't worry about it, because what I'd like people to do is to read this book.
Yes.
And then come back maybe and watch this interview if they had a chance, or tape it or something, and see what, you know, your thought process is here.
Right. In fact, they could. The book, by the way, it's available at Historica right here. It's available at the Book Nook in Dunkirk and the There's
Probably,
the bookstore in Fredonia, and throughout, it'll be available mostly throughout the county. If you want to call in, it's 1-888-US-AWARE, U-S-A-W-A-R-E, 1-888-US-AWARE.
Okay, we'll give those numbers again.
Okay, sure.
But the publisher, clearly, in Dunkirk can mail out copies. And that's it, US Aware?
Yes,
Okay.
US Aware.
You had a couple of references in there that I found really intriguing, but you didn't do much with them. And that was Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. One, there was this thing about Terry Nichols visiting Philippines, I think.
Yes.
And also, so your thesis there was essentially that politicians create such things and then blame them on the right, like Oklahoma and so forth.
Oklahoma City. Yeah.
Oklahoma City, yeah. Do you hold to that?
Here's how I know that. I was doing talk radio at the time of Oklahoma City bombing, and we're only a few hours away in Kansas City.
Right.
And I saw it. I had CNN on when the first reports came in because we were doing our show right at that time. Our show was on at 9 a.m. Bombing took place at 5 after 9. My co-host is, we do one of these left-right things. My co-host is a liberal Democrat. I saw the faxes coming in. I saw the faxes he was getting. I saw how he responded.
He being your co-host?
My co-host, who's a serious player. I don't want to give out names, but he's a serious Democratic
Well, he's a co-host on the radio. Why don't you give his name?
Well, because he'll get sued again. He's always getting sued.
All right.
So, he was gleeful when he found out it was Timothy McVeigh.
Whoa, really?
Oh, absolutely.
He knew. Oh, I see.
And then
he
from
wanted
that moment
a right-wing villain.
Right. And
Okay.
from that moment on, Oklahoma City was just a picnic for him.
So that was your character, the husband of Fiona.
Right, and not only him, but I saw it because I know these people. I used to get the faxes every day from the DNC. I get there in the studio first and see them, Democratic National Committee. They love this.
You know, I think you're totally wrong on this case. But although I'm sure that gleefulness is a real response on this part. I mean, I don't agree
totally
with that.
wrong about.
Totally wrong in terms of the right wing. You see, it seems to me that a guy like McVeigh, or maybe Nichols, I don't know Nichols, but is a product of essentially a media that focuses so much attention on the government as responsible for all the ills
and all the goods
and whatever. Yeah. And therefore, the target becomes government, not essentially who's controlling government.
Did you see McVeigh's interview on 60 Minutes?
No, I don't have television.
Okay,
actually.
well, that's interesting. Well, no wonder you read 2 books a week. It was a fascinating interview. I had never seen him interview before. This was just a few months ago. And he's not what I thought he was.
Oh, yeah?
And to say that he's a right-winger, he didn't know he was a right-winger.
No, I think you're right. I mean, but I mean, essentially the media, the concept of, the government is taking away your rights, the government is doing this too, I mean, and nobody really looks, there's a tremendous kind of thrust there that says all the things, you mentioned some of them, OSHA and EPA and so forth, all those agencies are responsible for the constriction of rights, and therefore we're not going to look at 15 corporations that own all the media. And we're going to look at just government, the government that you have the capacity to change. But the only way you can do it in McVeigh's mentality was to blow something up, assuming,
Oh, I don't doubt that he did it. And by the way, he's from Western New York too, which is we talked about.
That's extraordinary. I mean, you said it, basically Fredonia, Dunkirk. Is this true?
No, he's from Pendleton, New York, which is just north of Buffalo.
Huh.
I mean, it's just an hour from here.
Okay.
But I talked about Western New York in general, and it's called historically the burned-over district for all of the historical fires of radicalism, evangelicalism, that is spiritualism, that swept the area.
As you well know, that burned-over phenomenon extended into Chicago. I mean, just went and caught and went west.
With John Brown, who left New York State to go to Kansas.
Right.
Only a year before he got to Kansas. It's like John Brown in Kansas. Well, he didn't get to Kansas until 1855, But he, in fact, Frederick Douglass was up here. They met, I believe it was in Rochester before, and where John Brown tried to persuade him to go to Harper's Ferry with him.
Right.
And they have, they have the women's rights movement in Seneca Falls, to which I've been, by the way. They don't do a very good job with it. You have Mormonism started here, and The Millerite movement started here, and the Seventh-day Adventists started here, the spirituals started here. You know.
A question about your constituency. You, not to give away the plot, really, I think, too much.
Yeah.
And that is, you're organizing Seneca, and you're organizing Amish,
Right.
and you're organizing motorcycle gangs, and
Right.
you're organizing NRA folks.
Yeah.
You know, what about the kind of like working population? That's not in the mix too much.
Well,
only in the sense that they become organized.
Right, and you know, there's various, and that's why I think the unique cultural geography of Chautauqua County makes this viable. And it takes also this extraordinary person named John Freeman, who we're introduced to from the very beginning, who's pulling these forces together, because they naturally wouldn't come together. They wouldn't see their common bonds. He shows them what they have in common.
Okay.
But the traditional working stiffs, yes, or the rural working stiffs are very much part of the mix. You know, we talk about them, the people in the sort of the Celtic hill people, Scotch-Irish hill people who've, you know, been up there for 150 years. And
speaking of the Irish, Fiona Ritchie. Do you know her?
Yeah, sure.
Did you get the name Fiona Ritchie?
No, I had a friend, in fact, who my next door neighbor when I lived in France was an English woman with the name Shona.
Oh, okay.
A name I always liked the name.
Because you have a character in there named Ritchie as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. No, in fact, I think my first draft I had her name as Fiona because she's of Scotch descent.
Right.
But then I thought Fiona just sounded like too much. You know, it's like it was too obvious or something. You know. So.
You know. This novel has a handicap, as you well know, and that is it's political. It's not meant to entertain so much, although it does some of that. But I thought of a way that you could make it more entertaining, you know?
How's that?
Well, what you do is the kind of Crichton way, or any of those other guys. What you do is you have a guy like Piper or Popper. What's this guy who's the secretary? Anyway, well, you jump from scene to scene.
Yeah,
you
Pepper.
Know? Pepper.
The FBI guy, yeah.
I mean, because you didn't get enough of him.
Yeah.
You got him right in at the end.
Right.
There wasn't enough foreshadowing of the guy.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of scenes could have made it entertaining. But I think the problem for you is that you're not particularly interested in entertaining so much as you are, you know, articulating a political idea.
Yes and no.
Well, clearly you're interested in entertaining. It would be writing a lecture.
Right, exactly.
An essay.
And when I set out to write it, I mean, you know, if you read a John Grisham novel, I mean, they're all political.
They are.
I mean, some of them more
about?
than others, like A Time to Kill or Pelican Brief, highly political.
Well, you know, those are exposés and so forth. A tiny moment that gives you no overview and no real perspective.
No, but there's a point of view that's obvious. Even guys, I tell you know, guys like who I like a lot, Elmore Leonard. A lot of his novels are very political. Some of them aren't political at all, but a lot of them are, you know, like his Cuba book, and you know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, and what I've found in the people who are reading it, a lot of people who've read this book aren't political at all. They just read it for the.
What do they make of it then, not being political?
You see, the values presented are so intrinsically American and so endemic to all of us that they don't object. Because they believe in those same thing too. They just haven't looked at it from that perspective. And what intrigues them are the characters and the plot. It is, at its heart, it's a murder mystery. So, you know, regardless of how you feel politically, I would say, you know, I've had almost no one, and a lot of people, especially in this area, read it who are not political. And no one said to me, boy, I didn't really like those politics at all.
Nobody said that.
No, because the politics of these people are their politics.
Yeah.
It's just that they haven't, just like the protagonist hasn't fully
their politics
realized
in this book are not my politics.
Not?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, NRA, you know, a whole host of issues.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the NRA doesn't come up in a book.
No, but I mean, as, you know, they're taking away our Uzis.
Well, yeah, right.
Legislation.
Right, well, not Uzis, but...
Well, Uzis. That's your character, Lafayette.
Yeah, semi-automatics.
Well, listen, this guy opens his trunk and he's got Uzis in there.
No.
There's Uzis mentioned in here.
They're all legal guns. You know?
Oh, sure.
Actually, literally true.
There's some guy in here that's got
a
whole mass of...
He's got a whole mass of guns, but they're all legal. They're all literally legal.
Uzis?
In fact, I got the... I don't mention Uzis in here. There's AK-47s, there's Striker 12, which is the gun of choice.
Yeah.
The
Striker 12.
Yeah, great gun.
I'm not familiar with it.
It's the gun. It's the only act of violence in the book is committed with that gun.
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
Right in the amphitheater in Chautauqua.
Self-defense, etc. Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
It's probably why they didn't like
I guess not. No.
But it wasn't one of their patrons who got shot. All their patrons get away safely, you know.
No.
And they're treated with great respect. All the Chautauquans. No, I think that the thing is, Roy, is that because people say this because guns are part of it. Various people in the book come together. They're all defending one freedom or another, and guns are just another freedom. And if to isolate them is done purely for political exploitation by people who want to score points, who could care less whether.
I spent some time as a reporter and so forth out in the West and Idaho and Washington State and Oregon.
Yes.
And I know the Posse Comitatus somewhat. I mean, I've seen them and I've talked to them a lot. And not, just trying to figure out where they are. It seems to me that focusing on guns can become a priority in terms of you have no idea who your enemy is. You're so locked up in a kind of mentality that to take away my guns is to deny my freedom.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen, I mean, I know there's some exceptions to that, but that's my conception of many of these folks. And here, I mean, Lafayette character, your Lafayette character, codename Lafayette,
right.
You know, he was like waiting to explode.
And he's presented as a mixed character, too.
Yeah, I know it, I know.
But
I mean,
what he doesn't see is just as you suggest, Roy. He doesn't see that he focuses on guns as his right. And what only John Freeman saw, who was the person who brought them all together, was that they're all defending an individual right. And unless they, as Benjamin Franklin once said, unless we hang together, we're going to hang separately. So don't dwell on your right, and get hung up on your right.
Some of those rights can get you in deep trouble.
Yeah, I mean, look at, for instance...
Lafayette.
Yeah.
Blowing away this guy.
Although,
self-defense,
absolutely
blah, blah,
necessary,
blah, blah,
right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In the course of the book. However, look at, for instance, you want to talk about things that can get you in trouble. Look at the development of, let's say, digital photography and the internet, and digital videography.
I don't mean in trouble with authorities. I mean in troubles in terms of your own perspective. That's what I meant.
No, but let me just to put this in perspective. Digital videography, digital photography, the internet have caused, no doubt about it, a huge explosion in child pornography. Now, and they are clearly dangerous media. The question is then, do we say, well, let's have a 5-day waiting period for digital cameras? No, but it could come to that, and that's why I think it has to. If you're going to be vigilant about one right, you have to be vigilant about all the rights, and you have to respect other people's rights as much as you respect the rights you want to protect. Sort of like that whole thing we've heard too many times already. I can't remember it. First they came for the communists, and I wasn't a communist, so I didn't care. Then they came for the trade unionists, etc.
I want to do just a tiny little bit more housekeeping of sorts, and that is to say that we're talking to Jack Cashel. He is the author of a book that's published here in Chautauqua County. It's called 2006, Chautauqua Rising. And why don't you give us the phone number where people can...
the 88, for the call toll-free, 1-888-US-AWARE, A-W-A-R-E, or you could buy it throughout the county. It's available in a lot of places, especially right now in Dunkirk and Fredonia, or Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or you can go to any bookstore and order it.
Well, how are you doing on Amazon.com?
Well,
you check the numbers?
Yes, I did. 2 weeks ago, I was the 186,000th bestseller in America.
Wow, that's good.
And now I'm in the top 100,000. So in 1 week, I jumped over 90,000 other books, which is great. So a top 100,000 with a bullet going right next to it. So.
Really. What about national distribution? You had about a 5,000 run on.
Yeah, and the book is in the major distribution chains. Was it Ingram's and Baker and Taylor? So that what is critical is that we get the word out and the local bookstores stock it. Right now you can order it any place. And, fortunately, I did national, for Catholic Family Radio, I worked under a national network for...
For what radio?
Catholic Family Radio, which is a national network. So.
Are you Catholic?
Yeah.
And are you familiar with Opus Dei?
Yes.
Are you, I don't know whether that's like a communist, are you now or have you ever been type question?
Oh no, I am a traditionalist. I always have
yeah.
been.
But
Although
Opus Dei?
What's that?
Opus Dei? Does one ask one of that sort of question?
I'm familiar with the movement.
I see.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm.
I had some friends in Chicago.
Yeah.
Some years ago who were
Yes.
connected to Opus Dei.
Yeah, right. And
Some of the themes of your
Right.
reverend were
right.
certainly Opus Dei themes.
Yes, and but it's all listed. It's all papally blessed and everything.
Yeah, sure.
Because there is a schismatic branch of that.
I see.
The church politics are
Yeah.
bizarre. I didn't know about it until I got into it a couple of years ago. Accidentally, just doing a video. But so I did Catholic Family Radios I did broadcast nationally now for the last year. So, I have a certain base, and we had stations in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Kansas City, Houston, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, etc. So it's possible that, there's some name recognition out there, and we can work on that. In other words.
Good, okay. Well, one of the things we haven't mentioned then is that you and your publisher and staff put on a play from the book.
Yes.
In Fredonia.
Yeah.
At the Opera House.
Right.
It was a marvelous
Beautiful
production.
place, by the way. Wonderful building. I had not been there before.
Really?
Since it's been restored. It's a lovely place. And what a great production. You were there, Roy, right?
Yeah.
Much more ambitious than anyone anticipated.
Really? It was marvelous. It was
Yeah.
a good way to do it. What are you going to do with those? I mean, are you going to have photos and stuff? Because I noticed in previously the publisher's book, there were photos from a production like that. Are you going to do anything with that?
We'll probably use the video clips for video press releases and.
You can do it streaming video.
Yes.
Because the camera moves around quite a bit. I understand. So.
That's right. We could set up our own website. We have our own website, of course. 2006tcr.com, by the way. The Chautauqua Rising. 2006tcr.com.
Okay.
2006 was taken, as is every date for the next 8,000 years.
Really?
Yeah, those numbers are all gone.
And you have to pay rent on those.
Yeah, right. So, it was a great production. And it was like the event that we talked about.
Really?
It was an inspired amateur presentation.
Right.
In the book, by the way, the uprising.
The uprising
is purely amateurish and and grassrootsy and the great tradition of American nonviolent civil resistance. Sort of in the Gandhi spirit.
Except for the cache
Guns.
of arms out there.
Except for those guns, right?
Yeah, right.
But they were discreetly used, and they were, contingency guns. So.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to get your read on any kind of response that you might have gotten from Seneca or from the Amish. Anything at all?
So far, not much. The Amish aren't aware of it, as far as I know. We had in our show this great guy from. In fact, I read him the description of his character. The guy he played Ike Cornplanter.
Right.
His name in real life is Clayton. His last name eludes me right now. But he's a Seneca Nation guy and speaks fluent Seneca. Knows the tradition very well. I talked to him a lot about it at length, just to make sure that I got all my facts right, because there's a lot of historical research.
You're talking about after the book was written?
Yes.
Of course, yeah. Okay.
And although I called the Nation several times
you
when I was doing research, and I read several books on them, so there's not much written on them, but there
really
is.
extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a great story.
And the Amish itself, I caught one I think was an error.
Tell me about it.
Okay, the Amish are coming out of a church.
Yes.
And they don't go to church. They use homes.
Well, they have these meeting halls.
They do? I thought it was homes for church meetings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, I mean, did I say literal? Were they literally coming out of a church, or?
I thought so, but
Yeah.
it was silly.
But
I
it was
thought,
no.
one thing out of like 5,000 things. And so,
It's like going to the movies with my friends who are nuclear physicists. Don't ever go to a science fiction movie with a
really, it's just some movies.
12 times warp speed. No way you can go 12 times warp speed. Yeah. 11 times maybe, but not, they'll just drive you crazy with these little details. Right. I'm that way. I grew up in metropolitan New York, and so when I grew up in Tony Soprano country. You don't know the Sopranos, but that's my world. And
The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, the HBO series, excellent series, by the way.
New York Times covers it a little bit now and then.
But when I see a mob movie, because I grew up in and around these people, if the accents are wrong or the postures are wrong, I get just like my friends at the science fiction movies. So.
Right.
But it's a long way from growing up in that world to this world.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot along the way.
We're running out of time, but a couple quick questions. You
Sure.
do spend a lot of time with the Amish then and so forth, or just
I
basically kind
love
of
to.
casual?
I just drive through there a lot. I
Casual.
talk to them a lot. You know,
Buying
I
some
buy
lumber
the
and
stuff,
stuff like
you know.
that.
I did a lot of research on the Amish. Not that I didn't like live in their
You
houses
didn't
for
have
a
to,
week.
because I mean it's not that, you know.
Well, what's unknown, what was all new to me, was their whole history in America, their whole constitutional legal history, which is fascinating, because they have an exemption that no one else has, especially in education.
Right.
And just that, it's a razor-thin exemption.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's endangered?
Yes,
You
it
think it
is.
is?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
that's the point of your book.
right. Yoder versus Wisconsin. It's an exemption. All you need is a majority of 5. And the Supreme Court now, as you see, is used as a small legislative body that's unelected. They can do anything they want.
Right.
And they do.
Okay. Well, I know we're out of time, but you're counting on Gore to be elected president, because, I mean, who else can pull this? I mean, if it just...
Well, no, actually what has to happen is I imply in the book, I don't want to get overtaken by events,
Okay,
I imply that he loses in 2000,
Oh, and he wins again.
in 2004. I say there's more ups and downs than Richard
All right.
Nixon.
Okay. All right. But clearly the idea is to sweep out of office those people who are not attuned to the question of the necessity of democracy, probably.
Right, and constitutional liberties and civil rights, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, thanks a lot. It was wonderful
Thank
being
you.
down here. And this is, by the way, this is a beautiful day out here. I don't know how you can sit inside on a day like today.
It
It's
is
just gorgeous. Yeah.
Right. I'll do that. I'll get outside, and so will you.
Yes.
All right. Jack, thank you very much.
Right, my pleasure, absolutely. And
We've been talking to Jack Cashel. He is the author of 2006, The Chautauqua Rising. It's available at many bookstores in the area, and you can get it on Amazon.com and your website.
BarnesandNoble.com, 2006TCR.com, OlinFrederick.com.
And if you go ask them at the institution, I'm sure, Chautauqua Institution, I'm sure they'll pull one out from behind the counter and sell it to you.
Yeah, demand that they give you one, in
Right.
fact. Yeah.
Okay. And thank you for watching Chautauqua Books.